first, let me start with congratulations. I've seen the 4 episodes that HBO sent out, and they're what we call kind of good. I don't want to inflate your ego, but they're rather good. And good means great. We can keep on going like that. But can you sort of talk about, did you guys feel any pressure with the success of the first 2 seasons? Did you feel like any pressure with season 3? Like, oh my God, like there's an audience now and people love the show and it's critically acclaimed. And how are we going to, do something even better? Or were you sort of like in a little bubble, like, well, we're just going to make our show?
Yeah, it's kind of the latter, you just kind of, I think I learned at SNL that, it's always like it's a roller coaster, and like the minute, one week they would love you and the next week they would, hate you. And, if you read stuff online about what people think and everything. And so I kind of stop doing that and just go, oh, well, this is what I can control. And you just try to do your best on that day, and I really like this season. I would definitely say it's, we definitely tried to, it's like the best stuff I always feel like are the people who are making it for themselves, and for us, it was, within the writer's room, it was just kind of saying, well, what would just happen next, and trying to go deeper, and make sure that it's growing, that we're not doing the same things over and over again.
Can you sort of talk about the balance of, well, we love Stephen Root and we want him to be on the show, but there's an element of, is it more realistic on the show that he gets killed? Can you sort of talk about, is there like balancing the actors that you want to work with making the storyline sort of follow what should happen?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like you just try to take it step by step, and then you do kind of go, well, Barry tried to kill Fuchs at the end of season 2, but Fuchs is really savvy, and he escaped. And it's like, so he, I say this a lot in the writer's room. If I say, well, if I'm playing Fuchs, what I would say, well, my character would probably do this, or if I'm playing Sally, it's this, or if I'm playing Cousineau. And, you try to approach it hopefully with that in mind of, every character has a reason to live, so even when we have small parts, I kind of think, well, I've played those parts before, so you want to make sure it's like, the actor came down there to play it, you give him something to do, even if it's one line, you try to give them something to do that's interesting, and you see what they bring to it. But to really answer your question, no, I mean, I feel like, Glenn Fleischler is an amazing actor, played Goron, and it just became really apparent by the end of season 1, where it's like, this won't work if Goron's around for him, and it's how the writing went, and that was awful. That was really tough because we all really loved working with Glenn.
I can only imagine what it's like to tell as an actor. I can't imagine what it's like to tell another actor, yeah, we're going to be killing you off.
Oh, it's the worst. It's the worst part of the job by far, having to tell somebody, hey, you were recast, which we've had to do, or your part got cut. Because I've experienced all those things, for the most part, so, or I've established, or I've had, I won't say the movie, but I mean, I've been on a red carpet of a movie, and the producer's like, did you see the movie? And I go, no. And they're like, you're not really in it. And it stinks. Yeah, it stinks. But now I've been on both sides of it. I get it. When you're trying to make big story work, those things happen.
I can't imagine being on a red carpet. I can't imagine that happening.
It's a tough one. That's a tough one. And that was someone's mistake. That was a mistake. That wasn't like them being callous. That was them going, oh God, no one told him,
Yeah, I'm sure no one wanted to. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were shooting Barry up until the end of last year, and it's coming out in a few weeks, or it's coming out the end of April. Have you been sleeping?
Oh yeah, no, not at all. Yeah, we're posting Barry. So we're today we mix episode 6. So I'm going to that after this. So we're mixing episodes right now, and then I'm also this morning writing season 4, and and doing press. So yeah, it's a lot of work.
Has HBO actually said to you a season 4 is a go, or have they given you positive signs?
No, that's not the way it really works. It's all kind of like, hey, let's see how things go, and so
Yeah.
yeah.
There's no effing way that people are going to watch season 3 and be like, oh, this show's now bad, we don't want more.
You never know. I mean, who
No,
knows? But we're tempting it. Yeah.
Please, I watch an awful lot of movies and TV, and I can tell you when something is, you know what I mean, man. Like, like there's no chance HBO doesn't want more. 0%.
I'm glad you dug the first 4 episodes. It's really weird to be, they are kind of in your our little lab, and you're not really.
Oh.
You're thinking about it just like you're just alone in your room with a little project, and in this case, it's a project that involves hundreds and hundreds of really talented people, and it's like kind of our own little thing that we know about, and then suddenly, people are seeing it now, and it's that's surreal.
Yeah, the thing that Barry does so exceptionally well, and I commend you and Alec and everybody who works on it, is that you manage to make something that is very funny and also very dramatic, and the filmmaking behind it is also just so well done. Like, it balances all these different things, and each part is just so exceptionally well made. And I sort of wanted to touch on that with the writing, which is when you guys are writing the scripts, how are you figuring out the level of the drama and the comedy that's in each episode? I mean, can you sort of take me through a little bit of the writing process?
I would say that, most of it is kind of by feel. You're kind of going, well, okay, first day of writing season 3, I mean, the first thing I think I said was, okay, so Kusano knows. We wrote ourselves into a corner. What happens, and then it's just a conversation. Everybody's just throwing things out, and we're talking about it, and we talk about it. And then I like to be wrong fast, because you're going to be wrong. So I like to be wrong as fast as possible. So I tend to immediately go up on the whiteboard and just start writing out possible episodes. Like, all right, an episode 1 could look like this, and episode 2 could look like this. And it's just bench kind of big tent pole moments. You know what I mean? And you go this, and this, and by the end of the first episode, this could happen. Okay. And then you come back in, and then you kind of go, oh, you know what? Maybe this should move here. A good example I could talk about is season 2. I was doing that for season 2, and I put up like what could be the first 4 episodes. And in episode 4 of season 2 was, what if we see Barry in Afghanistan, and you see the first time he killed somebody, and that he was really lauded for it. It gave him a feeling of acceptance. And then someone in the room was like, man, what if that's in episode 1? What if that's the end of episode 1? And you go, oh yeah, whoa, that's way better. And now suddenly all this stuff that we were kind of kicking down the road, now it's all moved up, and now this is cooking, but you have to kind of go through the process of, making it, building a thing, and then tearing it down, and then building it up again and tearing it down. And then you just basically talk about it ad nauseum. And then by that point, it's like writing it is very, very quick, because you've talked about it so much.
When you go into the writer's room for that first day to talk about the season, have you been subconsciously or writing at home, like all these ideas, or is it sort of just all in your subconscious and you're just letting it out on that first day?
Some yes. I don't think it's a spoiler to say this, but I do think like one of the first things I said was like I think the acting class should be closed, which was an interesting kind of feeling of like if the acting class is gone, like the equation of the show is hitman goes to an acting class, and most shows it's like, well, that's the equation, so don't mess with that. But what was happening is we had 2 seasons and both seasons ended with a class show, and the class and everything was just kind of feeling a bit like, okay, I just don't know what to write about these scenes anymore. We've done a lot of this scene. We're going to start repeating ourselves. And so it's like, let's just take that out. And once we took that out, it became both liberating and kind of terrifying, because the other elements now aren't connected. They're now free floating around in space. And so it became about almost kind of writing a new show, in a way, with the kind of what's driving Barry now, what's driving Kusno, what's driving Sally, what's driving Fuchs, what's driving Yoho Hank. All those things are very different this season in terms of the way they have been in the previous seasons.
Oh, that's something that I found also very interesting about the season, is that the structure of the show has completely changed.
Yeah.
Which is what you're addressing. For fans, what do you want to tease them about season 3?
Well, I mean, the acting class is gone. Kusno knows. So it's like, Kusno, that was a big thing for us, was kind of saying like, all right, what would Kusno do? Like, he has this information. And it's been 6 months since the end of season 2. Sally is at like a kind of career peak where, well, Barry is kind of at the lowest point he's ever been, which is really saying something. And NoHo Hank is kind of, his personal life is in a really great place, and he's scrambling at work basically. But I will say, like, the season very much for us was kind of about, and it kind of happened organically, where this idea of forgiveness started to come up, and this idea of like, season 1 was I just want, kind of I want to better myself. Barry tries to get in touch with his emotions, and he does, but at a bigger cost. And then season 2 was I can change my nature. Can you change your nature? And now season 3 is kind of this idea of, well, those things, I don't know if those things work. Can I be redeemed? And he's really up against the wall this season. And the Barry character this season is the first time we really see him kind of lashing out to people he loves, and he's very vulnerable and cornered at the beginning of the season, and he's trying to now just get these kind of basic things of feeling redeemed and forgiven by people. He's kind of it's he's in a bad place, but it's definitely I think what Barry doesn't understand is that there's consequences. I don't know if he gets it.
That's very, very true after seeing the episodes. Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if he understands that there's consequences.
What is it like, actually, the relationship with HBO? Now that you've made 2 seasons, they know what the show is. How much do you have to sort of lay out to them everything you want to do with like a season 3, and how much is it sort of them being a little more hands-off-ish? Like, I'm just curious what the notes are like from HBO, and how much do they want to know?
I mean, I feel very lucky. We work with Amy Gravitt over there, and she is just amazing, and it's amazing to be a part of a thing where the notes you're getting are very thoughtful, and kind of like, she just loves solid storytelling, and she just wants to see something that is well told. So there's episodes this season that, especially later in the season, that are very rough. There's not a lot of comedy, And she's like, that's great, that feels right for the characters, and she very much is in tune with the people, which has been amazing. But then they'll also let you do some crazy stuff and go, huh, all right, yeah, go with it.
Sure.
Yeah, sure, that's great.
In an ideal world, I'm sure you've been asked this before, but in an ideal world, do you have like an amount of seasons that you want Barry to go for? Is it like a 4-season plan, like a 5 years?
I don't know. I mean, we just kind of take it scene by scene. I mean, that's true. I mean, it really is just kind of step by step, and then I think the big thing that I'm always thinking is like, what is truthful, what's the truth, and then what is uh you know and then kind of what's the logical thing, and then you just try to, I think we'll find a point where we kind of look at each other and go, yeah, yeah, I think this is it, you know. Um, so, but it's definitely, yeah. I'm interested to see what people think of this season. I mean, I think it's, I mean, I could say this: we screened all the episodes for the writers, and one of our writers at one of the later episodes had a panic attack.
Okay.
So I took that as like a good. I was like, okay. I mean, they're fine, but I was like, oh, okay. Well, that's. I mean, it was terrible they had a panic attack, but I was also kind of like, oh, okay. Well, we'll see what we'll see what people think.
When you guys are writing the show, how much are you thinking about budget when you're actually writing? How much are you thinking about like, well, we can block shoot this, and and you know what I mean, like the actual. I guess I'm curious about
Yeah,
that.
yeah. What you end up doing is what you always hear is eighth of a page scenes kind of kill you. Like a scene where it cuts to somebody buying a coffee real quick, and then they see something on their phone, and they go, what, and then they run out. Those are the scenes that end up schedule wise where Aida Rogers, our producer, will come up and go, could this happen in the apartment set? Could they be brewing coffee at home and see it? Because we have a schedule, and I think that's always the big difference between TV and movies. Like I remember I went and saw this advanced screening of The Irishman, and I walked out and Ava DuVernay was there, and we were talking about, man, the amount of coverage and the amount of kind of eighth of a page scenes in that movie. Like Scorsese just goes like, no, we need, yeah, you shoot the scene in the coffee shop where the guy does this and you're out, the whole scene of Robert De Niro getting into the plane, and then they cut inside the plane. And on television, you would, you know what I mean? It's a thing of the amount of coverage you have to kind of think about, because your schedule, you're moving like this. So sometimes, yes, sometimes you do have to uh, um, think about budget in those ways. But then there's other times where I kind of like to go, okay, well, these scenes are pretty small. These episodes are kind of small, and we're kind of saving it for this one big episode where there's a big set piece. You know what I mean? So this big set piece, it's going to take us longer to shoot that episode, and it's going to be more expensive. So to balance that, one of the earlier episodes is pretty contained, or two episodes are a little bit more contained than usual, so we can have this bigger thing.
Yeah, that's what I was curious about. How much? What is a typical like shooting schedule for Barry? Is it like an 8-day shoot, a 10-day shoot?
Well, initially, season 1, it was like 5 days, 6 days, and then season 2, again around 6 days, but then something like Ronnie Lily maybe was 7 days, 6 or 7 days. Um, but then this season, because of COVID and COVID protocols, we had longer days. I think it got to, some of them were 9 days. I mean, there's one episode that's pretty involved later in the season. That was about, I would say, 9-10 days.
Is there a character that ends up being the toughest to write for in the room, or is it all pretty much the same?
Honestly, Barry, it's so weird that Barry's the weirdest one to write for. It's the last one we write for. I think I get so excited about all the other characters that the thing of Barry doesn't have a story comes up every season, where we'll be ready to shoot, and Duffy Boudreaux or Liz Sarnoff or Alec Burke or someone, Barry doesn't really have anything to do. And so, I mean, season two, episode 7, all that stuff about Barry getting an audition and reading for Jay Roach and all that, we came up with that probably 2 weeks before we shot it. Where that episode initially was Barry, we had the script, we did the read through, did everything. And it wasn't until we were kind of, I mean, I think, maybe a week away, where we thought, God, this episode, Barry's just kind of moping around. It was him just kind of moping around. He had no drive. He didn't really want anything all season. He had nothing to do, because we were so excited that Cousineau and Fuchs were going to meet, and all the stuff with Sally Show and all this stuff we just thought was way more interesting. And Hank on the bus, that's that episode where like all our head was just in that somebody thankfully was like, Barry doesn't really do anything in this episode. And that happened again on season 3, where it was like, he doesn't really do anything. He's just kind of watching people. And so, yeah, it's a thing that we have to remind ourselves, or I have to remind myself, like, he needs to at least want something every episode.
In the beginning of season 3, there are some pretty emotional scenes that you have to perform. And I believe you're also directing. And I'm very curious, what is it like for you when you are doing these really emotional scenes and also directing? I mean, like, how are you pulling that off?
Yeah, I think I know specifically the scene you're talking about. There's a scene where I guess you could say, go into a rage spiral. And it's pretty awful to watch. I'm pretty terrible to one of the characters in the show. Barry's very terrible. Yeah, you just kind of, I don't know, you just kind of walk through it. You have a plan. You kind of talk out the coverage, and yeah, I mean, you just do it. And there's, I don't really know what else to say. I mean, yeah, you just do it. And and you try stuff and you fail, you try one thing and it's like, oh, that wasn't really, let me try something else. And, you just kind of do it. And that specific scene, when people see it's in episode 2, it was, a lot of that was, there's a very slow kind of dollying back of the camera in that scene, and that was kind of setting up that there's about to be an explosion. So it's things like that. You're like, he's about to explode and this is going to have consequences. And but that was a good example of that scene. When people see it, all the consequences after that came in reshoots, because we watched it and initially there was consequences, but I realized I wrote it poorly, which was, it was kind of the same thing was happening over and over and over again. And one of the characters wasn't being reactive. And I showed it to some of the writers and they kind of all had the same note, which was, that was awful. I think someone would take action against that, and it was like, oh, interesting. And then the conversation that happens afterwards is kind of what happened, because then you go talk to someone else and go, for not to ruin anything, but it's like, if Barry flipped out on somebody and someone was like, well, we have to report him to the cops. I asked him, I was like, well, the cops wouldn't do it. What did he actually do? He just gets mad at somebody, you know what I mean? And then it just became, the actual argument became, not the argument, but the points everybody was making in the writer's room just became the scene. So it was like, instead of saying, well, here's how you fix it, the better the more interesting thing to me is you say, here's the problem, you just dramatize the problem, so I know it's hard to talk about this without giving shit away, but that was the idea in those scenes, which was really interesting. And it's why it's why you need a writer's room. You need people to say that doesn't really work.
There are some really phenomenal camera moves. I think it's the first episode, but it might be the second episode that's going through, like, I don't want to give away anything, but like a studio setting.
That's the first episode, yeah.
Yeah, and it's very impressive filmmaking. How long did something like that take to do?
That was the very first shot of the very first day of shooting. That was Gavin Kleintop, our fantastic first AD, and very much my partner and all this stuff. He's, it's very rare to get a first AD who's like a total film fanatic, and is like, oh, I get it. Like, I see totally what you're trying to do. He was like, what'll bond the crew together is if we do this big oner on the first shot, So we had what they call a day zero. So it's the day before you start shooting, and we all got together and walked through the scene with the actors and just went through the whole thing. And then the first day of shooting was, we did it and we got it. I think it was take 16. We were done and totally, it was like nailed it. And then we shot the rest of the stuff. We were done there, and I think we, broke for lunch. I mean, yeah, it was one of those days where it's like, we're going to be here all day or whatever. But I remember after the first take of that big oner, we were like, oh, I think this is gonna work. I think we're gonna get this, It was just tweaking stuff.
The thing about that shot is that there's a lot of different lighting. There's a lot of different actors. There's multiple locations in the shot, and the location of the camera starts much further back and eventually gets very close. How exactly did you set up? I know your DP was Carl. How exactly how did you work with Carl in terms of how you wanted the shot, because it's something you directed, to actually go?
Yeah, I mean, it's something where you kind of say, well, this has to be a oner for a reason. I think because of digital, you see a lot of oners now, and you kind of go, why is this a oner? And the great one shots, the Copa shot and Goodfellas, it tells a story. That one is kind of the best one because it totally tells you a story of, here's how these guys work. They go in through the back. They don't, it's, here's this life that Lorraine Bracco's character is being introduced to. And so for me, it was to show, kind of from my own experience, the enormity of running a show, and how, so the character comes in this big studio, and it is kind of like you're very small in the frame, and this thing is much bigger than you. And then as you're asked more questions and things like that, and they're trying to move through their day, it just becomes incredibly goes from objective to very subjective. And that's what I was telling Carl. And it was built, the sets were built for the shot. It wasn't like, oh, we have all these sets and the camera will go here. It was like, I figured out the shot and then got with Eric Schoonover, our production designer, and Carl, and we just mapped out like, okay, here's where everything goes for the shot. And he built it specifically, so that's where the camera would go. And then we had Kenny Davis was our grip, or dolly grip on that. And I felt it was good luck because he also worked on the big oner at the beginning of Boogie Nights. So I felt like we were in good company, where it was like, oh, Kenny Davis is here.
Can I ask, when you guys are writing the episode, how much are you thinking about the way you want to film everything in the writing process? Like, when does your director hat come on in the writer's room in terms of, oh, that we could do that as a oner, and this needs to be shot this way? You know what I mean?
Yeah, sometimes, a lot of times it comes later because I'm so focused on like what the story is and kind of, but what the characters are going through, and then a lot of the times the camera work will inform that. There's a shot later or before actually that shot with a bunch of actors in a hallway that ends in the close up of one specific character, and that was a way of introducing that character, these two characters dynamic for the season. But again, it was kind of like I got very into this idea of being wide and then slowly moving in to a close-up, or you start in a thing where you go, oh, this is just a wide two shot of people, and you're objectively, we're from the point of view of just watching them down a hallway speaking, and then we're slowly walking towards them to kind of hear what they're saying, and then it ends in a subjective moment with one of the characters. And again, it's all intuitive. I feel like this season I got a little too into it. Like I got, as the show went on, it was like, that's one of those things, when you do think about, okay, if we do season 4, let's chill on the objective, the subjective dollying in shots.
Talk a little bit about how you worked with Carl in terms of like the lighting and the framing to reflect Barry's mood.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of that is Carl and I was always, the first conversation we had together was I said, I really like DPs like Robbie Mueller, where it's, very composed, but with like natural light. So you watch something like Paris, Texas, or American Friend, or, the Vin Vendors movies, or the stuff he did with Jim Jarmusch and stuff like that. That was always something I was really kind of inspired by, and I just liked that look. Repo Man is another one. The way Los Angeles looks at night in Repo Man is like one of my favorite things. And so yeah, it was like, how do you keep it composed? How do you kind of keep it simple? And I just want to know where all the light's coming from. What's the source? A lot of comedy is very overlit because they want you to feel bright and fun and we're having a good time. So everything is just, it looks like a spotlight's on it, but I much prefer the things that, you see shadow, you see contour, it's people are being lit by a source that's way off screen, things like that.
I'm constantly amazed. Did you see Judd's movie, The Bubble?
I haven't seen it yet, no.
Well, there's something in that movie where he shines a light on press junkets and how people will ask actors like the craziest things that they have no business answering. Like, how would you solve, like, that would be someone like yesterday at the junket for you asking, so how would you solve like the crisis in Ukraine?
Yeah.
Like something completely out of left field. So I am curious, what is it like when, as an actor, doing press and people asking you the craziest shit that you have no reason to answer it?
Yeah, I don't think as an actor I should be answering anything about anything other than the show that I worked on, because that's the only thing I know anything about. So when people ask me, I got a lot of questions on the junket about, cancel culture and comedy, and what do you think about Will Smith and Chris Rock and all this stuff? And I'm just like, I don't, why are you asking me? Like, no one wants to hear from me. It's like, I do a show. That's the only thing. I can't answer questions, I mean, I can't have answers for questions I don't know the answer to. Like, I don't know. I really don't know, but so it is weird when you can kind of feel what is like, oh, you're not interested in the show, you're kind of needing clicks or something, it's like you're wanting some, it is hard to answer questions now, because even a thing where you think you're just being kind of innocuous, where you're like, even just going, yeah, no, it's too bad, it's like Bill Hader thinks Ukraine and Russia is just too bad. And it's like, no, that's not what I meant. What I mean? It's just like, so I do clam up, I think, a bit more, and it just, each time I read myself in print, I just want to say less.
I honestly don't know if I was on your side. I don't know what I would do if someone asked me something about cancel culture, because no matter what I said, someone would take it the wrong way.
Yeah, yeah, and you just yeah, and I'm not on social media or any of those things, but the real answer is I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, I know how I felt, I feel about certain things, but it it um but it's, things are pretty complicated. And so yeah, and I'm not on social media because I am wrong all the time. I will be at a dinner and I will go, well, isn't it this? And someone's like, well, no, it's actually kind of this. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. And then someone else will go, well, it's not, it's this. And I go, oh, that's also true. you know? And I'm like, I would be apologizing every day. So I'd be like, hey, that thing I said, you know what? Someone told me something else. And no, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the only thing that you could get away with is like just posting photos on Instagram with no comments. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's
Here's
your
a
only
chair.
safe way.
Yeah, here's a chair.
Yeah, it's just I am in the editing room today. That's it. That's your
I am on the editing room. Yeah, I would. Yeah, I'm not, I would not be very good at it.
So episode 3 is called Ben Mendelsohn. Someone on Twitter asked me if there's a specific movie about a specific Ben Mendelsohn movie they should watch prior to watching the episode.
Oh, any of them. I think he's such a great actor. I love Ben Mendelsohn. I have to give credit where credit's due. The Ben Mendelsohn stuff in episode 3 is Emma Barry, the writer of that episode. She was really she's really funny, and she loves Ben Mendelsohn. That's like we just say let's yeah, favorite actor.
He's quite talented in front of the camera.
Amazing, yeah.
Yeah. So someone else on Twitter mentioned this. Barry slaughters about 25 people in the most recent season finale. Are we still supposed to find him lovable?
That's kind of up to you, I guess. I mean, yeah, I mean, I never found him lovable. It's fun. It's interesting how people found him lovable. I think he's a highly complicated guy who's kind of not that bright and pretty violent. He's trying for something. He is trying for something. He's trying to understand himself, but maybe people sometimes see themselves in these things, but when we're writing it, it's always kind of like, what's the interesting, honest, truthful thing about the guy? And again, going back to something like Goodfellas, Goodfellas, I'm like, I'm along for the ride. Wow, what a cool group of guys. And then Spider gets killed. Or the scene where he grabs a gun from Larry Bronco and shoves it in her face. And, that scene's awful. And you go, oh, right. These are violent, awful people, So, yeah, I kind of see Barry that way.
It's funny you keep on bringing up Goodfellas. I mean, I think that's my favorite film of all time. I could watch that film on loop. It's just it's on another level.
Yeah, it's so funny, real quick, because I was talking about this with somebody. If you had to name your favorite movies, and it was like, I don't know if I could, but I could say, well, here are the ones that hit me and changed me, And if I had to go Scorsese, it would probably be Taxi Driver, but it was just because when I saw it, like you see a certain movie first and you go, well, is that their best movie? I don't know, but that's, for the Coen brothers, it's Barton Fink. I saw that in the theater when I was 13, and I just was like, whoa, that was amazing. But is that their best movie? I don't, they've made some great movies, I don't know. So yeah, it's always tough. It's always very personal, but Goodfellas was one that came out when I was 12. And I remember my parents renting it and turning on when the first scene happened with Joe Pesci and he starts stabbing Billy Bat to the knife. My dad went, okay, and turned it off. And so for me, then I was like, oh, now I got to see this movie. How do I get a hold of this movie? Because then it became, forbidden. It was kind of like, whoa, no, we can't watch this.
Yeah, it's interesting because as I've gotten older, I have pushed away from the concept of something being the best.
Yeah,
because how do you compare art? It's all subjective. And also, as
exactly.
you know, if you see Casablanca when you're 20, you have one opinion of it. But after you've had a real love or real loves in your life and you watch Casablanca again, it's a completely different movie.
Yeah, it's a completely different movie. Yeah, I mean, that's why to me it's always like, what are the ones that hit me that you kind of went, oh, that's how comedy, you know, like I mean, well, people I get asked all the time, oh, what's your favorite comedy? And I was like, I don't know, but I mean, Spinal Tap and Monty Python and the Holy Grail, I saw really young, and I was like, oh, that's how you perform comedy. You know what I mean? Like you don't push, you play it kind of subtle, and you know what I mean. So I guess those had huge effects on me. Are they the best comedies? I don't know. I like a lot of comedies, you know, so it's a tough one.
Yeah, I've probably seen Spinal Tap 50 times. I mean,
Yeah, it's like to the point now where it's like not even fun. I know every syllable of that movie.
yeah, I mean, I don't, I think I've destroyed the joke. It goes to 11, like,
Yeah,
decades
yeah, yeah,
ago.
yeah. My favorite thing in Spinal Tap lately, I think about, is when they're lost backstage and the guy says, "You got to take a little jog," and Harry Shearer says, "We don't have time for that."
It, it's bizarre how good that movie is.
Yeah,
And it doesn't make, it's just on another level. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, which is
yeah.
why we've all watched it a thousand times.
Well, it was new. Yeah, it had a new feeling to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I think people forget it was like 82 when they made it.
Yeah, the only thing kind of before that, Woody Allen did Take the Money and Run, and then Albert Brooks had, Real Life, those kind of funny mockumentaries. But Spinal Tap's really, that's or Zelig also was pretty interesting and well done, but Spinal Tap was the one that was the funniest.
So you've already mentioned that Barry, it takes place. I'm just about out of time with you, and but I'm curious. You have a 6 month jump from between season 2 and season 3. How did you decide on the 6 month jump? Was it ever going to be longer? Like, how did that happen?
No, it was kind of by virtue of one of the characters getting their own show, so it was kind of by that you had to kind of just go, well, if that would happen, let's say the fastest that would happen where they're writing and shooting, we gave it 6 months. And then, you know, so it was kind of by that. And then that let us kind of go, well, where's everybody else at right now? You know?
You have talked about how you are very specific with your opening shot on Barry in the previous seasons, like with season 2, the way he's going. I forget. He's going out of darkness, or he comes out of darkness,
Yeah,
I
yeah. He
believe.
comes out of darkness the first time you see him. Yeah.
So with season 3, I don't want to be specific because I don't want to ruin it for anyone, but there's a specific shot of how Barry is introduced. And I'm just curious, is that significant in any way?
I think the thing with the very first shot of the season is you kind of see where his mindset is compared to where it was in the previous seasons, of and hopefully, that will come across when you see it. If just kind of, well, here's where he's at, as opposed to where where he was at, beginning of season 2, or beginning of season 2, he's trying to do front page and just pretend that he didn't kill Kuzno's girlfriend. He's just trying to like he's in hyper denial. And beginning of season 3, I don't, you'll see, I guess.
Completely. I think this is my last question for you. Obviously, with HBO, you don't have a specific runtime that you have to hit. It could be 25 minutes, it could be 35 minutes an episode. How is it do you end up with a lot of deleted scenes during the seasons, or is it?
Not really deleted scenes, but we will like cut like lines or little moments, or we'll cut a scene. There's one scene later in the season that's a pretty funny scene that actually has a guest star in it that we cut in half just because we thought it was really funny, and we tried a bunch of stuff and it just wasn't working the way that I thought it would in the edit. And then there's actually a big kind of thing that was actually going to be pretty expensive that I was going to do later in the season, that decided, like, while we were cutting it, it was like, oh, this is becoming about, process stuff, or kind of, you know, um, weird, like filmmaking, rather like how do I say this? It was more about the hardware and the effect stuff rather than like the emotion of the scene. And so then once he said like, okay, what's the emotion of the scene? And me and the editor, Frankie Gutman, we were like, what's the, and Ali Greer, other editor, we're like, well, what's the emotion of the scene? And once we figured out what that was, all this stuff that we had been planning and people were doing, it all went away, and so that'll happen where you have to call people and go, yeah, stop building that. I wrote it, I didn't write it right, I'm so sorry, and so that'll happen.
I'm sure your line producer loves those phone calls.
Oh yeah, it's like, you know what? Actually, I think she does, because she's like, oh, hey, we're spending money. I'm glad we didn't spend all the money on doing all that. And then you look at it and then go, yeah, you know what? It was like, no, cut it. Like, don't do it yet. We don't need it. So yeah, that's happened. That happened on season 2 as well. There was a whole, when Barry was telling his story about Iraq, and we would cut to Afghanistan. Sorry, we cut to Afghanistan, and he's telling a story up on stage. Initially, the camera would push in on him, and behind him, the curtain would open, and the curtain opened onto Afghanistan, and it was going to be this kind of motion control shot of moving past me through a curtain into Afghanistan. And we worked on it, we tried it, and got in the edit, and Jeff Buchanan, the editor, was just like, watch this, and he just cut straight from me to Afghanistan. And I was like, yeah, that's got more energy and that works better. And he was like, so you try shit and it's like, oh, this will look cool and it's different, it's interesting, and then you go, it's really drawing attention to itself, and it's kind of actually taking away from the emotion of what the scene is.
It's so funny because I love oneers. I love them, but I especially love them when they're significant to the story. But I wonder if the average person watching at home who's not like a cinephile really, I think they feel the tension of a oneer, but I don't know if they really realize they're in a oneer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe. I kind of like it if they didn't. To me, it's just like you just want to be caught up in like what the person's going through. I think of great oneers. There's that one in Children of Men that goes through the bus and everything. I mean, that's unreal. And it just feels like you're with Clive Owen going through this thing, and the whole time you're just wanting to run the other way. And it's like, no, we got to follow him, and it's just breathtaking, but it's like I know it just because I'm a film nerd, but it's like I get caught up in the emotion of it. The Goodfellas one, I'm caught up in the emotion of it, or suspense ones like, beginning of Touch of Evil, or those things.
Yeah, Children of Men is another film that if you're watching or reading this interview and you have not seen, for the love of God, Bush Play.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most underrated movies of all time. I think it's just absolutely brilliant. I mean, for a guy who's made some of like amazing award-winning movies, I think my favorite 2 films of his is that and U2 Mama Tambien. I can watch those all day. I get really inspired watching those films. They're so inspiring. All the choices are just amazing.
I saw Children of Men for the junket at the ArcLight Hollywood, rest in peace until it comes back. And
yeah.
My jaw, like I literally left the theater like with my brain melted,
Yeah. It was it's just a phenomenal film. I mean, and it's like that. It's like a, again, it has like this real momentum to it and suspense and everything, but still is incredibly emotional. And I just think it's unbelievable. I really do.
I think I could talk about Children of Men for the next hour, but I'll leave it alone. I'm just going to say thank you for your time today. I know you are a very busy person.
Oh, no, thanks for anything for you, Steve.
Please.